All right, American Hammers TV, welcome. Sunday evening, we're having a chat with an American West Ham supporter tonight. This is Grant in Springfield, Missouri, who lived in St. Louis for a long, long time. So he knows Brawley and the gang from what used to be called American West Ham Podcast and is now, I think, part of West Ham Way USA or something like that. Before we get started, very quickly, a couple of things. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. The more subscribers we get, the more we can start to run ads, make a little money, upgrade a little bit. I can get a better flag. I can stop using my brother-in-law's computer that I'm still using because I still have my own. We can do all sorts of things to improve the channel. So that's really what we're out to do. We don't want to keep the money for ourselves. We want to improve the channel. So if you could subscribe or tell somebody to subscribe or help us get more subscribers, that'd be great. Check out Drinkware Design, our friends there in Plano, Texas, who do the custom mugs and engraved gifts and all that stuff. It's nice stuff. And check out AmericanHammersTV.us. Now 40% crappier than it was last time you saw it. It's marginally better than before. Got somebody working on it. It's going to look good eventually, but I'm not a web designer, so it's the best you can do for free. But the reason I say that is because we have our link to our bonfire site is still out there. You can buy t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, really nice stuff. I just got another round of stuff myself the other day, and I have to say it's really nice. It's far better than I expected it to be. I have 2 t-shirts and a sweatshirt, and they're great. So 3 t-shirts, whatever, a lot. And then we have our scarves are still for sale, I think. And for those of you who bought scarves, we got them, and we're going to be sending them out this week. So if you're expecting a scarf, it is on the way. No worries, it'll be there at some point. It's been a little bit of a hassle, but it's coming, and I think they're really nice. So I haven't seen them yet, though, because he came to Tim's house. So I don't know what they look like. But
nice.
Anyway, that should take care of most of the business stuff. So, Grant, tell us. By the way, in case I didn't mention, my apologies, I didn't mention, as we do on Sunday nights now, Celly, my co-host out in California, out near Sacramento. This is our show now that we do together, so it's good to have him here. So let's go to you, Grant. So we were just talking right before we went on the air. You're in Springfield, which is down in the southern part of the state, apparently. You lived in St. Louis for a long time. You know the St. Louis guys. Take me back to how you became a West Ham fan to begin with, and the better question is why?
Well, on some of the past episodes, you guys have talked about, and the guests have talked about, you don't become a West Ham fan, for the glory. You do it for other reasons. But actually, the very first match that I watched on TV, I was living in the Netherlands at the time.
Oh, nice.
West Ham was the 1980 FA Cup, was broadcast in the Netherlands. And that was, at that time I was following Eredivisie teams, obviously, but I watched that match, and, it's kind of the thing to root for underdogs. And West Ham was clearly the underdog, Division II team playing Arsenal in the FA Cup final. So I was rooting for them. They won, and that's kind of where it started. And I followed them for a while I was still in the Netherlands. That's where I played my football. And then when I moved to Germany, I sort of lost touch with it because there was no English football televised in Germany at the time. That was before cable TV and the internet and all that. So I used to have friends who lived in England would send me newspaper articles about, West Ham. They actually would cut them out and mail them to me. And actually, my father passed away last year. And when we were going through stuff, I found some of those old newspapers from the 80s. So I always kind of followed them from afar. It was hard to be a hardcore fan after I left the Netherlands until, they started broadcasting it here in the U.S., the Premier League. And so I got right back into it. And in fact, talking about FA Cup finals, I was in London in 2006 for the FA Cup final, with Liverpool.
Yeah.
Couldn't get tickets to the match, of course, but, I watched it in a pub in London. I was in Southeast London, so pretty much everybody there were Hammers fans. So that was a great experience too.
Have you ever had a chance to go to a game in person to see them?
I haven't. I've never been in London, at a time when there was a match. The closest I got actually to getting a chance to see him play is when I was over there one time in the early 2000s. I was up in Northern England, and they were playing at Sunderland. And I was trying to get a ticket. Again, that was right before, the internet was available, but it wasn't like it is now, where you can just tweet looking for a ticket with, when you're have all these West Ham connections and somebody will come up with one.
Yeah.
So I actually went to the Stadium of Light and stood outside trying to get a ticket, and nobody, I couldn't find anyone with an available ticket. I think they thought I was an undercover cop trying to, trying to bust them for selling it illegally. So, so I haven't seen them play live. I did the next week actually get a ticket to a Sunderland Newcastle match just to go see a Premier League match, and that was, those are huge rival. That's a huge rivalry. That's a derby match. So it was good to see, but no, I've not been present live at a West Ham match.
There's a lot to unpack from what you just said.
Right.
Let me start with so 1980. So you were a glory hunter. Let's make that very clear right off the bat.
You just not a very good. And that was pretty much the end of my glory with West Ham, the first game.
Yes, not very good at it, unfortunately. So 1980, you were in Holland. Now you don't seem that old to me, so you must have been a kid at the time.
I was 13.
Okay,
I'm 52.
Okay. So we're not too far off in age. You were 13. So what were you? Were you in a military family? What were you doing in Holland?
Yeah, exactly. My father was career military.
Gotcha.
So we lived there from 77 to 83, and then Germany 83 to 85.
Where'd you live in Netherlands, out of curiosity?
The closest city that most people know is Utrecht.
Yeah.
But I lived in a town called Schusterberg.
Okay.
It's halfway between Utrecht and Amersfoort, if you know the Netherlands at all.
I lived in Rotterdam for about a year. And when I was living in Paris, I spent about a year of that time in Rotterdam. I played rugby on a student rugby club in Rotterdam. We traveled all over the country, which isn't far to go, playing rugby. So I've been to every city in Holland.
Right.
Every rugby pitch on the outskirts of every city in Holland. So, that's very cool.
That's where I started my professional football career. I was at a Feyenoord Rotterdam Academy for 2 summers.
Oh, did you really?
Oh, wow, nice.
Oh, no.
What position were you?
Mostly I played on the left wing. So when you see Felipe Anderson, I played exactly like that.
Yeah.
Kidding.
That's a club. That's a huge club, Feyenoord. That's one of the 3-4 biggest clubs in the Netherlands, obviously. So how old were you when you did that?
Those were the summers I was 15 and 16. So I was there the summer when Johan Cruyff, when Ajax wouldn't sign him to one more year. He thought he had one more year in him, so he jumped over to Feyenoord and played his last season there. That was the same summer he signed for Feyenoord. Was my first summer at the academy.
Did you meet him?
I would say I met him. I was around him. He really didn't talk to the academy players.
Well, fair enough. Now, how did you get involved with the academy? Were you, spotted, or is it something?
Yeah, kind of. So there was a small team in a town nearby where I lived called Hoogland, and I played for pretty much everybody else. I guess I'll call them adults at the time, were service guys that played on the base soccer team.
Right.
And so I played on the team with the GIs, and we played. They played in a Dutch league, and we actually played a Division III team there that was based in Hoogland. And so the manager at Hoogland, his name was Jan van der Linden, had some connection. I think he played like, when in his playing career, he played with one of the guys who had something to do with the youth academy there and at Feyenoord, and he said he'd talk to him and if I was interested in going over there. So, they gave me a tryout for a couple summers, and then eventually they were like, I wasn't going to be good enough to move on in the Feyenoord system. So he called back, and Jan was still at Hoogland, so he took me in there, which was great because it was a lot closer to where I lived anyway.
Yeah.
And so I played a little Division III in Hoogland for a while, but then they got relegated down to Division IV, which is in the Netherlands only the top 3 are professional, and after that they're kind of semi-pro.
Right.
So then I was playing, but I was just, when I say I was playing, I was kind of that last guy on the bench. But I got in some matches, and I actually played a game in one of the matches against Utrecht.
Yeah.
So that was pretty neat, playing in a stadium that was in AHTV Stadium against basically their second team. That was in the KNVB Cup.
Right. That's
which is the Dutch equivalent of the FA.
FA Cup. Right. Yeah.
Right.
So did you? So you got paid? You were a professional footballer.
Yeah, I got paid a little bit. It was mostly just uniforms, my expenses, and that sort of thing. Back then, Division III, most of the guys had other jobs and things like that. I was still a student, but I did get paid a little money. So yes, that's why I did professional and air quotes.
Oh yeah. So when I'm assuming you went to Germany because your dad or family got orders to go there.
Correct. He got PCS to Ramstein Air Base.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've been there. It's an incredible base. Not too far from Frankfurt, if anybody's curious. But
right, it's about an hour.
Yeah.
Frankfurt.
So when you were in Germany, over by there, obviously I know football there is pretty huge. Did you try to join any academies there?
Yeah, well, I tried out. I played one summer there for a semi-pro club in Sembach, Germany, which if you've been to Ramstein, maybe you know Sembach. It's about 20 minutes away. There's another American air base there.
Okay.
So, yeah, I played a little bit, like one summer into the fall of semi-pro in Germany. But
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying I couldn't get linked up to any bigger club than that. So.
Okay. What I was going to ask was how would the two different academy systems kind of compare from Holland to Germany?
Well, I was in the Netherlands longer, and I could speak. I had learned to speak Dutch, at least conversationally, and I could not. I never learned German, and the Germans were much more xenophobic, so to speak. So I felt a lot more at home in the Netherlands in their system, and plus that was right at the height of when they were implementing all the the total voetbal across the board, or total football.
Yep.
So that was I really enjoyed that much more. And in the Germany, it was just more to keep playing because I wanted to play and I wanted to keep my skills fresh. I had it in the back of my mind that at some point I'd get a call up to the U.S. squad. Of course, nothing ever close to that happened, but
Right.
Kid's dream.
Yeah.
You're talking about the 80s, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't impossible back then. I mean, we didn't have a lot of sort of football infrastructure back then. I think it was 1990 was the first time we qualified for the World Cup since 1950. So I mean, it wasn't.
Well, 86 we qualified.
Did we?
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but
I
yeah,
think so.
I don't have a good memory for it. But anyway, we didn't. Soccer kind of died in this country, or from the end of the North American Soccer League until almost 1994 when the World Cup came here.
Right.
Now, you must have been one of the very few Americans who were in, like, Feyenoord Academy, for instance, or playing semi-pro in Holland and Germany. How did they treat you as a Yank over there, especially back then when it was, they didn't have, connects. We didn't have the internet to sort of all connect in one place and get to know each other. How did they treat you as like an outsider?
very much like an outsider. Even in the Netherlands, which was much, to be honest, was much more friendly than Germany.
Yep, I can see that.
There was at the time in the Feyenoord Academy the only, because it was much less international back then, and so even like Dutch academies, which are now known for bringing in players from everywhere, were not as international as they are now. So it was pretty much all Dutch guys. There were 2 Brazilian players, and me were pretty much the ones in my, at my level. And
Right.
the Dutch guys were willing to accept that a Brazilian would be playing at their level, but they were not ready to accept an American. So, yeah, it was tough sometimes.
Because you're talking about 82, 83, somewhere around that time period. It sounds like.
That's exactly the 2 years that I was in the academy.
I mean, it was just, the game here was just dead at that time. I mean, the old North American Soccer League folded around 84, but it was on its last legs for several seasons. And we weren't really a factor. We didn't qualify in 1982 for the World Cup, and we weren't really a factor on the global stage at all. So, yeah, I can imagine that they were like, who does this guy think he is?
I can imagine, too, in the States. I think now, obviously, I think soccer has grown a lot more, MLS and, all that good stuff. But I think if you look back then, just the sports infrastructure of the United States in the late 80s, early 90s, that's, Michael Jordan's early years. You had the Steelers, the Cowboys are, huge. The
49ers.
49ers, Yankees, Dodgers, 2 big name teams. They were still winning everything. So I know it's
yes, even my beloved Cardinals were down until 82 they won but all through the 70s they were trash.
Yeah, because they had been great in the 60s, like the Bob Gibson era. And
right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no. You're good. I was just saying, I think it's hard to, ambitious as anybody might be, to start up a league. I think when you have that many big time names and the sports that people are just used to watching, it's kind of hard to just come up, especially when you don't really have a national team for people to kind of base any name off of.
Right.
It was definitely. And by the way, once I had Neil in Australia, who was watching us on Monday morning in Australia. He's always watching.
Never misses a show.
Never misses a show. It's good to have Neil here. I don't know if Neil has a job, but whatever he does, boss obviously doesn't mind us watching or mind him watching us at almost lunchtime.
Yeah, every episode I see him making comments and good comments too.
Yeah.
No, always good comments. No, we love Neil. Neil's a good dude. He's been on with us before. Anyway, Celly, you're right. I mean, it was basically the '94 World Cup that made MLS possible.
Mm-hmm.
2 years later, I think it started in 1996. Because before that, as you said, soccer kind of died, using the S word because we're talking about it in the U.S. Soccer kind of died in the mid '80s here, and then there was. I mean, you had the rise of the NFL in the mid '80s and early '90s when it became like the biggest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, you had Michael Jordan become the most popular athlete in the U.S. and one of the biggest athletes in the world. You had the tail end of the Bird Magic era and all that stuff happened at one time.
I think Gretzky might have been playing around that time too, right?
Yeah, he was. I was, when I came back here and was a Blues fan, in fact, in the early '90s, Gretzky played on the Blues for half a season.
Yes, he did. You're absolutely right. So it was a time of, Bo Jackson was around back then playing 2 sports, and then a little later Deion Sanders played 2 sports. It was a time when it was hard to steal attention away from American sports, especially when there was no internet. There was no way to get to fans. If you didn't have a TV contract, if you didn't have a lot of media coverage, it was hard to establish something. So,
right.
I think so much of what you see now is American fans who watch soccer or like us. They're doing a lot of stuff online, right? They're watching stream channels like ours or on Twitter or so forth. It's not. I mean, there's a much wider audience because there's more access to it. Back then, it just wasn't around. So that's great. That's really cool that you had that kind of experience. I think that's something that a lot of Americans obviously have never had, but especially wouldn't have had in that era. To have been able to play in an academy with a massive professional Dutch club, in the early '80s, that's and I think Feyenoord back then were pretty successful, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the top 3 teams in the, as I say this, Feyenoord is sitting in 9th right now, but the top three teams,
Right.
you know, in the Eredivisie are always, you know, Ajax, PSV, and Feyenoord.
Feyenoord,
So
yeah. Neil tells us he's retired, but I did not know that.
Nice. Congratulations on retirement.
That is good to know. Now I can't get the comment off the screen, so not sure exactly how that works. Here's Tim winking at us. Anyway, that's a cool experience. So tell us about your experience in St. Louis. You said you lived in St. Louis for a long time before you moved to Springfield. So you knew Brawley, you knew the St. Louis, all the Hammers there in St. Louis. How'd you get involved with those guys?
It was a function of two different ways. One, and you may have heard about this from Dave Sperry, who was on the show once, and Brawley and everything.
Yep.
We have a sort of soccer central pub in St. Louis called Amsterdam Tavern.
Yep.
And, I started, because it's named Amsterdam Tavern, as soon as I saw a place with the name Amsterdam on it opened, I started going there. And that was like 2007. And then pretty soon there were more Hammers that started coming in. At first, I was the only guy that ever was supporting West Ham that was there. In fact, most people, when they saw me in claret and blue, assumed it was Villa, till they looked at the badge. So, and then some more and more people started coming in, but also, we got, I guess, a little over 4 years ago, we got St. Louis FC, our USL club in St. Louis, and a lot of the same people, were involved in the supporters group and so forth. And so, I kind of met them through both places, got to know them that way.
So kind of, you just referenced St. Louis FC. I don't know if too many people in the chat know, but St. Louis actually got an MLS expansion team. That I don't know if it'll start next season, but for sure within the next 2 years. Was there a lot of excitement in St. Louis and just Missouri in general when that was announced that they'll have a team?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess pretty much all the soccer fans were, excited about it. And there were a lot of events and so forth leading up to it. One of the owner of St. Louis FC is also in the ownership group for the MLS club. So, there was a lot of sort of cross, promotion with the USL club because Jim Cavanaugh is an owner of both.
Nice.
And
this has a long history too in soccer. I mean, it's been a soccer hub in the U.S. for many years, decades.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing it's most known for, I think, is 6 of the starting players from that 1950 team that beat England during the World Cup were from St. Louis.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And so we call it America's first soccer capital, or America's soccer, first soccer proving ground, that sort of thing. But actually, St. Louis is the home to the most USL Cup titles of any city, because back in the day when it was all like semi-pro teams and stuff playing for it, there were, I think it's 12 or 13 U.S. Open Cups in St. Louis that were, won by these semi-pro teams that were sponsored by like one of them is, a funeral home and, things like that. That funeral home has like 4 or 5 U.S. Open Cups.
Wow.
Oh, that's fair.
So
The name of the club was the name of the funeral home?
It was like, it's Kutis, Kutis, and it's like Kutis, and then whatever their mascot was.
Oh, wow.
So it's
Reapers.
hysterical. Yeah.
Palmers,
the Grim Reapers. So
I think it's a smart place to put a city, because I know obviously the Rams aren't there anymore, but when it comes to the Blues and the Cardinals and anything else that you think of with sports there, the fan base is there. I mean, I always see the fans travel. I'm from Colorado originally, so when I've gone to Avalanche and Blues games or Rockies and Cardinals games, you definitely notice the St. Louis presence for sure. So I'm sure that won't change. Especially too, I saw some of the renderings for the stadium that they're going to play in, and it looks really, really nice for an MLS stadium. So that'll be pretty cool too.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And the team, even though I'm 3 hours away now, I'm planning on getting season tickets. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it wouldn't make for a bad trip.
So, what's the plan? Is the derby going to be Kansas City, or is it going to be Chicago, or what do you?
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the plan, if the MLS has it their way, it's going to be both. You know, that they're bringing us in to sort of give a natural rivalry to both cities. But I would have to imagine the bigger one would be Kansas City. You know, they're cross-state rivals. It's closer. But you know, we do have with like the Cardinals Cubs is a huge rivalry.
Right.
You know, the Blues Blackhawks is a huge rivalry. So it would seem natural that we would have a derby with them also. And you know, if you look like in English football, there's some teams have more than one match that they would call a derby. So
we talk about London derbies every time we play a London club. So
exactly.
You have Millwall, which is the sort of the classic West Ham derby, but then of course you have like Tottenham, which we play them every season. And now we don't play Millwall very often, so yeah, you think of Tottenham as a derby, or you take like Manchester United, Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool, kind of the same idea. It's like so I can see it. I can see it kind of being both. So you're going to travel. You're going to get season tickets, travel to most of the games.
I'm going to try to travel to as many games as I can. Speaking of Sacramento, you know, I think that the announcement is imminent for them having a team.
They'll have a team out here too.
And so I always thought, well, that'd be great. You know, if we end up, you know, we have games, it's easy for me to fly there and have a place to stay. And then Austin's getting a team. My sister lives in Austin. So, you know, same thing. That's a short flight, or it's a 9-hour drive from Springfield. So, you know, I figure I set it up. But it was funny because I was telling people, hey, look, I have 2 siblings, right? And I know I moved from St. Louis, but I'm pretty much St. Louis. The 3 newest teams are going to be St. Louis, Sacramento, and Austin, where all 3 of us live.
Right.
So.
That's great.
So do you think so with the way the MLS currently is, and I guess this would be a question for both people and everybody in the chat. So I know they do a playoff system, and I think they're the only professional league in the world to have a playoff system. I think
Mexico might have one too, but yeah, it's very rare. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys think that it would be better off like having a table, like how, you know, the English Premier League and everybody else does, or do you think the playoff system is good just because that's what Americans are used to in the sports?
Well, if I'm being honest, I would say I would prefer, and I know this is a hotly debated issue, I would prefer to have, you know, a pro-rel system. Yeah. However, the problem we have in the U.S. is, you know, in like just using England, for instance, since that's one most people are familiar with, all the teams in the FA have, you know, they're independently owned. Like you can't own a team that's in the Premier League and then still own one that's at any other level. Right. So you never have to play your own club. But, you know, in the U.S., at least as it's structured now, all of these clubs, you know, like look at all the USL teams that are like Red Bulls to Sounders to, you know, Timbers
that's true.
And so, you know, you can't get relegated into playing your own, you know, a club owned by the same entity. And like I was just discussing earlier, you know, the same guy that owns the USL club has a stake in the ownership for the MLS club in St. Louis. Yeah. And so that's the problem, is they'd have to divest all these minor league clubs before they could, you know, put in a pro-rel system.
They've worked that out in places like Holland, where you have young Ajax and young PSV and young Feyenoord who play in the 2nd division or 3rd division. They worked out in Portugal. And a few other places like that, like Benfica and the big clubs have, you know, have feeder clubs that play in the lower divisions. And I don't know what the rules are for not playing each other, but I mean, they don't play each other somehow. So Germany's the same way. I think as American fans become more sophisticated about watching football, and I think it's happening very rapidly. as more people watch Premier League, Bundesliga, other European leagues as opposed to MLS, which, by the way, people are doing. I mean, there's a guy on Twitter named Christopher Harris. If you well, actually, he's on LinkedIn more than Twitter. But if you find Christopher Harris, he's kind of an expert on TV ratings for American soccer, and he's an interesting guy. He's a good guy, and he's done kind of some looking into, like Sheffield United, for instance, regularly draws more viewers than the biggest MLS clubs in a given weekend. So one of the least popular Premier League clubs regularly gets more viewers for its games than like LAFC or NYCFC or whatever. So I think you're seeing American fans become more sophisticated about how we watch the game and how we understand it. I think MLS and the rest of the U.S. soccer pyramid will eventually have to have a promotion relegation system. But Grant, the problem is, as you said, these are franchises. The MLS owns all the franchises. They don't. The owners don't. Bob Kraft doesn't own the Revs. MLS owns the Revs, and he kind of runs the Revs, if that makes sense. It's even more tightly controlled than the NFL. So it's not like a club at all. It's actually a franchise. Plus, I mean, if you think about all these countries all over the world where they have promotion relegation, what's the furthest you're ever going to have to go in England if you're Southampton and you go to,
it's probably about the same amount of time it would take him to drive to Austin. You go from Manchester to Birmingham or something.
Drive from Southampton to way up into Scotland in something like 24 hours.
Right.
Whole country. I mean, even out of England up into the whole of the the UK. If you start talking about having the Charleston Battery play a club in Sacramento, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like it's second division soccer where you get maybe 3,000-4,000 fans show up per game, and your TV contract is either non-existent or is certainly not paying for much. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to say, all right, well, now we have a second division, and you've got to go from Washington to Florida for a match. That's really hard to do. However, I think we must have to come up with some regional structure because I really think that we're going to have promotion relegation in this country eventually. I just think it's going to take a lot of convincing, and I think you have to be able to walk up to Bob Kraft or Arthur Blank or any of these owners, these big money owners, and say, hey, so if your team isn't good enough, you're going to be playing the Pittsburgh Riverhounds next year, in front of 2,000 people instead of having Zlatan come in with the Galaxy. They may not their multi-million-dollar investment.
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say is one of the other problems in implementing pro-rel too is like who's likely to get relegated, one of these new teams. When you look at like England or the Netherlands or Germany, these teams are hundreds of years old. They sort of came up organically. Well, here the owners in St. Louis just paid $200 million to get this franchise. And if they had to face relegation their first year, do you think they would have forked out that kind of money?
Exactly.
Probably not.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it's probably not going to happen at least until the MLS says we're done, and then these guys get a return on their investment, or in St. Louis's case, these gals get a return on their investment.
I think you're right. I think yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't even just be the MLS, because I think with the MLS, you kind of already have that structure. Teams have soccer first stadiums. They have TV contract with ESPN Plus and DAZN. I think a lot of it, if it were to happen, would have to be with the USL. Because just like Lee was saying, you play the Pittsburgh team in front of a high school crowd in a high school soccer stadium. Now I understand. It'd kind of be like going to England and say, hey, you're a League One side. We need you to build a stadium for 10,000 people, and you have it done within the next 3 years. I think it would be hard to do, because Colorado kind of has a USL team called the Riverbacks, I think, or the Switchbacks.
Switchback.
And they play in Colorado Springs, I believe, and that's not that big. They get a decent crowd. Don't get me wrong, but it's not that big of a stadium. It'd be tough to do, mainly just because you have to build up the USL, which would obviously be the younger division, before you could do that. But I think just off of and sorry to rant, but just off of the MLS growing, it's like we just said, that's 3 new teams, and already they only do a 16-team playoff. So, or maybe not even that many. It's like a 10-team playoff.
You could maybe
So,
thought you were starting to get to where you could almost split the MLS in half and say,
yeah,
oh, we'll just have two divisions, right? Which gives
right.
the excitement of promotion relegation. But then you don't have anybody dropping down to play in the USL. You just say, how many, what is it going to be, 32 MLS teams, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
16 and 16 is not an unreasonable number of clubs in one division or another. But again, as you said, what do? Go to the owners of FC Cincinnati or FC St. Louis or Austin or any of these new clubs and say, oh, by the way, you guys, thanks for the $200 million. You guys are starting the second division.
Right. Or I mean,
Right.
you could take any team that started within the past, let's say, 6 years, and like, hey, just you guys are going to be the younger division.
Yeah.
You'll still get the same TV exposure. You'll just be the younger division, just because, like how Grant was saying, that every team in England's been around for 100 plus some odd years. My grandpa's grandpa, watched the team. So I think if you take the younger squads and just say, hey, just you guys will still get the same benefit. It should just be the championship of the MLS, if you will. You don't really give them a choice.
I think that's how it may shake out. That's kind of what the NHL did back in 1967 when it expanded from 6 teams to 12. Put the original 6 in one division and the other 6 in the other division. And the original 6, clubs for many, many years won not many years, for a while, won the Stanley Cup every season, which has been around, But eventually, the Flyers won it in the 70s, and it came, there was a lot of parity, and all that stuff sort of ended. So, anyway, I think we should get to some Hammers polls. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let me see if I can figure out my StreamYard here. Application window, Chrome tab. There we go. Sorry, this is a little bit me trying to figure out what we're doing. All right, I think that's working. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
okay.
Nice. Okay, excellent. So, I am so massively disappointed about what happened on Saturday that I almost don't want to talk about it. Especially since we have we always lose before the international break. I should have known
Right.
what happened because it's guaranteed we're going to lose before the international break. So you have to sit on that for 2 weeks. The worst part is, my two sons play, and my 6-year-old son, I coach his team. I help coach his team. They had a great game on Saturday. They were fantastic. And then my 9-year-old son's team went to Somerville, Mass, and won a game 5-0, and they looked really good, and I was really excited. And then it was probably 10 minutes after Isaac's game ended that we conceded to Palace and lost 2-1 at home. So anyway, it was fun while it lasted.
Right.
Bummer for me above all else because Saturday was rolling right along until we did what we do. But let's take this first one concerning Lanzini. We brought him back in against Palace. You see what the results here, what the vote is here. We'll start with you, Grant. What do you think? Right thing to do, bringing Lanzini back? He didn't look great, but then nobody really looked great to me.
Yeah, I think it was the right thing to do. Actually, I noticed on the show earlier today they were talking about, well, it was, was his knee hurt or not? He was actually out for a foot. He had a bruised foot, and they thought it was a deep bone bruise, and it turned out to not be as bad as they thought, which is why he got back faster. Yeah. I think he's, at this point anyway, he's at least far superior in that, midfield role to either Fornals or Wilshire. So I think it was the right thing to do. I'm not even sure they should have taken him off, but
Yeah, Celly, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, just for the form that he had before the injury, let's say if he were healthy, if he was available in the squad and he didn't come on and we still lost, then you'd have people saying, oh, well, why didn't you bring him on, kind of thing. But I think just purely from the form that he had beforehand, with his skill and distribution, I know he hasn't found the goals just yet, but I think you have to start him, I think for now, he'll get there. But just right now, he's still trying to find his footing. But yeah, I think it was smart to start him. It's a frustrating loss, but I don't think. I think he was bothered by the injury. You could tell he didn't really get into the game, but he's definitely not the reason we lost it.
Yeah, I don't think he is either. I mean, as we always say, we don't know what happens on the training ground. We don't know what the attitude of the players is. We don't know how well they do in training. We don't know how they feel, what their relationship with the manager is. I think Tim voted no on this because it says that our vote was no on this Hammers poll. And I didn't vote on it, so Tim must have voted no, which is fair, and I get that. I understand what he's going for. I tend to agree with the two of you only because Wilshire and Fornals have been disappointments to me so far. It's a little unfair on Fornals. He just came to the Premier League. He hasn't had that much time. I think the jury's still very much out on him. Wilshire's been a little bit of a disappointment to me. I know he's been injured for the last 12 years or whatever. I'm really excited about him, and I really thought he'd be one of our better players, maybe even our best player if he could stay healthy. It just hasn't turned out that way. So I think given the other options, Lanzini was actually the best option. I do. I think he's
I think I just blanked on his name. You just said it.
Sure.
Yeah, him. He hasn't been a disappointment just because he just can't stay healthy. And I think everybody wants to see him stay healthy, but the fact of the matter is I can't remember the last time he played a full season without spending some time. Just like how we had the hopes for Andy Carroll. He came over, he was doing great, and then, he sneezed too hard and he's injured. So
yeah, and it only went 7 years with him that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I won't even lie. There's been times where I forgot Wilshire was even on the team just because he's been out for so long.
I have too. And Winston Reed is still with the club, and then I read today that he pulled his hamstring or something. Whatever.
Yeah, we should just cut our losses with both of them, to be honest.
At this point.
Well, the problem with Reed is they gave him that massive contract a couple seasons ago. He's got like 4 years left on his contract, so you can't. And who's going to take him like this? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think he signed his contract at the right time because I mean he was playing well. I don't think there was anybody that played poorly in the 2016 season or the bowling season. So I mean, and he scored the last goal at the ground. So I don't know.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah, and even the year after, the season after that, he was great again in that United match that we drew 1-1 at Old Trafford. He was like the man of the match. I mean, he was everywhere. I mean, he single-handedly aerially protected the goal like on corners and so forth. I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, when he's healthy and 100%, he's great. We wouldn't have an issue. Well, not that we have an issue now with center back, but
well, I mean, it
was definitely his spot.
Shaky to me. I love Issa Diop, but he's been looking a little shaky to me. And Balbuena has fallen snapped, and I mean, but Winston Reed, if you think about it, I can think back on 3 or 4 performances by him in that 15, 16, 17 time frame that were absolutely superb. We had a win against Manchester City at one point where he was man of the match, just a rock throughout the whole match. Obviously, the performance in the last game at the Boleyn with the goal, but there were more than just that. I mean, he was, legitimately a fixture in our starting 11, and I think the contract was justified. We just had bad luck, right? I mean, same thing with Andy Carroll. I mean, when we saw him, I was very excited. It just didn't work out. Injuries, and it just didn't. With Kieran Dyer, I go back to him. He was a great player for us. The 20 minutes he played for us, It just. Anyway, let's before we get to the top 10 or 10 questions, rapid fire questions with Grant, which I will try to keep rapid fire, which is not my thing. I'm not good at rapid fire, but anyway, let's do another Hammers Pro real quick. I'm tired of talking about the Palace match.
That's fair.
So why don't we talk about where we could strengthen in January? The poll question itself is: do we need to strengthen in January, and if so, where? I mean, maybe you don't think we need to. I'll leave it up to you. But if you do think we need to, tell us where. Grant, why don't you start us?
I think we could use a good central midfielder. Preferably somebody who was, sort of defensive minded, a holding midfielder maybe. There's actually a little bit of a difference between a holding and a defensive midfielder. I know they're used interchangeably now. And I think Declan Rice is a great defensive midfielder. but maybe a holding midfielder, that could hold up play and sort of be the fulcrum going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, Declan had a rough game on Saturday, as we know, but obviously he's our future, and we hope he stays with us for as long as possible because he's a brilliant player. I think Mark Noble is our talisman in a lot of ways, but again, as we've talked about for a while, I don't know that he makes 38 league games for us. I don't know. I hope he does, but I don't know. Well, he won't because he's already missed a couple, but you know what I'm saying. 30-plus league matches.
Right.
I can see the need to have somebody come into that position and, as you said, be more of the fulcrum because we run that sort of, 4-2-3-1 type, where you have the two kind of defensive-minded midfielders, and it would be nice, as you said, to have Declan be more the defensive mid and then have a true holding mid with him. Which, Noble can do, but is he going to be able to do it? Is he going to still be doing it in February, March, April, May? I don't know. He's getting older, I don't know. What do you think, Celly? Sorry, Grant, go ahead.
I would say people accuse me of, when I say things like that, they accuse me of, quote, slagging on Noble and so forth. But, I'll say, look, right now we need him because there's no other real natural leader on the team right now. And he's also, has great field vision. Yeah. And he's very good at putting himself in the right place. But, he's not going to muscle anybody off the ball. He doesn't have recovery speed any longer.
That's right.
Things like that. And his problem earlier in the season was dead leg. That's the kind of thing that you tend to get as you get older. And, I just think like over the summer, when Joan Jordan was available from Marseille, I don't know if he's still available, but that's somebody that, is a great, sort of holding midfielder that can fill those defensive spaces and can, move the ball forward. If we brought him and he's like 24, 25, he could sort of slowly start filling in for Noble and, as they phase Noble out more, put him in more. So
because Noble he's not going to last forever. We know that. And I don't know how many seasons he has left in him. I hopefully several more. But I feel as though even this season we're going to start to see him hit a wall physically at some point. He usually does. He's getting older, and he usually does. And as you said, Grant, he's not quite as quick as he used to be. He does have those beautiful cross-pitch passes that, he has amazing vision for finding a spot to put the ball in for an Anderson or a Lanzini or, one of the attacking midfielders to get to. But as far as being in that position in the center of the pitch where he's going to have to do a lot of running and have a lot of speed and quickness, it's getting harder, It's getting harder. What do you think, Celly? Where do we need to strengthen? If you think we need to strengthen, where do we need to strengthen in January?
So I saw this question. I even voted on it myself. It took me a while to decide on what I wanted to do because I think so far to the first handful of games of the season, there's each part of the field as far as position-wise has shown great flashes. There's been games where the back four has been great. There's been games where the midfielders have been great. And obviously there's been games where Allaire by himself, I don't think he's honestly had a bad game per se.
No, I
think he played really well yesterday.
He did. He did.
But I think, in all honesty, if we had a full 100% healthy squad, like we were saying at the beginning of the season, I think you put, Jack Wilshere above Noble just for skill purposes and things of that nature. Or if you were to play in a different system, I think maybe you get somebody who, a proven striker to go up top with Allaire, because I've never liked a one striker system. I know for some teams it works, but, those teams that it works for, it's like your Manchester Cities, there was a while where Manchester United only had, what's his name? I don't know why I'm blanking on him. The Belgian guy who always scores on us.
Kaku. Yeah.
Yeah, him. They had him up top, but even then, like he went to Manchester United, and I don't know if it was the system or what, but he wasn't that great. But at Everton, he was fine.
At Everton, he scored for us every time they played us.
So right, and I think I don't know. I've always just thought the two striker system was good, but I say that to say if we have two strikers, it's one of the positions that we take away is going to be either Rice or Noble. And obviously it's not going to be Rice.
No, it's not.
So I think right now, honestly, if there were a spot to strengthen, it probably would have to be one of the, defensive midfielders. And by one of, I mean, if we had a person that was Mark Noble, but like 10 years younger, he would start right now, and Mark Noble would play the cup games. As much as that might infuriate some people to say, Mark Noble, like you said, towards the end of the season, I mean, I don't know if he's going to be able to keep pace with a lot of the other teams. And we really only have just the league and the FA Cup run to do now. So I don't know. We'll see. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I have I've always railed about needing better fullbacks, both left back and right back. But Cresswell's been playing pretty well lately. Masuaku, when he's been eligible, has been good. I don't like Ryan Fredericks much, but he's been serviceable. Probably need somebody to back him up. That's a concern for me because I don't think Zabaleta is ever going to be back up to match speed for the Premier League.
No, I'm curious, honestly, when Ben Johnson's going to get a crack at a continuous role.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, his debut against Manchester City last year was so good, but again, we're not on the training ground. We don't see how he performs in training. We don't know how the manager feels about him. But I'd like to see that too.
Yeah.
He's naturally a right back. They played him at left back, but his natural position is actually right back. So, assuming, he stays in Pellegrini's good graces, he could just slide right in when Zabaleta moves on after this season.
And that's
definitely.
what I'm hoping will happen, and I think what the club hopes will happen.
Yeah.
I think actually right now our greatest need. I mean. A lot of it's going to depend on when Fabianski is actually able to come back, because Roberto was not the reason we lost on Saturday. I mean, he was fine. We didn't take our chances, and then we conceded late. It was a classic West Ham game, quite frankly. Classic. But I do think we're going to have to find another keeper if Fabianski is out really long term. 3 months is a long time, but if it stretches into the kind of thing where he's still in rehab in like January, we're going to have to find somebody else. Also up front, I mean, if Aller goes down, we really don't have anybody behind him at all.
No.
It's hard to find. We know that. But I'm with Neil here. I'd like to see us play two up front too. I especially at home. I feel as though if we'd had two up front in that game yesterday, we'd have potted a couple more goals and put that game away.
Yeah.
Pellegrini's used a 4-2-2 before. Even at Manchester in Spain, but also at Manchester City. If you remember that season that he won the championship there, they were playing the first half of the season. They're playing Aguero and Negredo both up front.
Yes.
And then when Dzeko came back and Negredo started losing form, it was Aguero and Dzeko up front.
Yeah, it just helps to have two up front, just because you can't have three defenders on one guy,
Absolutely. And you saw, I mean, look at how much trouble Zaza caused us yesterday. And he didn't, he wasn't the goal scorer. He didn't score, but you get another real striker or attacking player up front like that. And you've got to have somebody deal with him. You got to put a body on him. You got to mark him. I know Pellegrini in the time he's been with us has really generally only played one up front, but I'm with you. I'd love to see two up front. I'd love to say it. I'd love to see us, even get into a situation where we have just, we don't have three kind of across the midfield. We bring two up front, and we put more of an emphasis on the strikers and less of an emphasis on the attacking midfielders, and try to get some goals knocked down in the box like we did for Yarmolenko against Bournemouth.
Well, nobody talks about this much, but, I've kind of followed Yarmolenko's career because he's the highest profile player out of the Ukraine. And my sister-in-law was born and raised in Ukraine. Her father used to be the keeper for the Ukrainian national team.
Oh, wow.
And plus, he played only one season, but, he played at Dortmund, which is a team I kind of follow.
Right.
It's not too far from where I lived when I was in Germany. And he played all across the front line. I mean, he's played in the striker role before, both in the Ukraine and sometimes at Dortmund. And in fact, when he was at Dortmund, he wore number 9, and he's left-footed and Aller's right-footed. they could play the two of them up front and then, work, Anderson, Lanzini, however, on the wings. And
Yeah, I'd like to see more of that. I really would. I don't think we necessarily need the central attacking midfielder. But we got to find somebody to fill that role. Right now we have Allaire, and honestly, if he goes down, we're in very, very serious trouble.
Yeah, I think a question mark too that I'm sure will be answered. I don't know if it'll be this season, but at least for the start of next year is Silva. Because obviously he was out with a pretty bad injury or sickness or whatever the case may be. But when he was with the U23s, he was tearing it up, or the U20s, whatever team he was playing on.
That's right, he was. He was
the PL2. Yeah, he was great. And I'm not sitting here saying that he's going to be, a 20-goal scorer, but if he's good enough to, maybe knock in 10, 15, if he does get the starting time, and if we do play a two-striker system, granted that's a lot of ifs, and we don't know what his future even looks like because he still could get loaned out or whatever. But,
right.
Who knows? Especially somebody that we picked up and is sitting in our pocket,
Absolutely. Well, and listen, you got Holland scoring goals.
Diangana is doing great.
Doing well, and I know he had a rough match against Oxford, but Oxford was a disaster. But I continue to believe, by the way, we haven't won since Oxford. I continue to believe tanking a match, I don't care what competition it's in, tanking a match is a recipe for starting a downturn. Losing is contagious. It's always bad. It's never good.
Yeah.
And arguably the best player in that match.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think so. I don't think we can judge him, based on 50 minutes or whatever it was he played in a game where we obviously were not. He had no interest in actually, playing proper football and trying to win. So, all right. So we have a few minutes left, Grant. Let's if you guys don't mind, let's move to our 10 questions, 10 rapid fire questions. Grant, you ever see Inside the Actors Studio with the obsequious James Lipton?
Yes.
Okay, so this guy. I love this guy because he makes every actor who comes through there look like Laurence Olivier. He has Dave Chappelle on them, and he's treating Dave Chappelle as if he's like John Malkovich or Al Pacino or something. He just kisses up to everybody. So that's kind of what we're doing with these questions. They're supposed to be rapid fire. I'm not really sure why we do this, but it's kind of fun. So let me get this to where I can actually see it. There we go. All right, so you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. First question is meat pie or apple pie?
Apple pie.
I should also add. Maybe I should have added like a little stamppot in there or something. A good Dutch dish as well. I used to like that stuff actually. I used to buy it prepackaged at the market in Rotterdam. The Endive stamppot. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Although Dutch food is, it's okay. Who's your favorite current West Ham player?
Yarmolenko.
Excellent. Ukrainian connection. This question could go for almost any of the starting 11 on Saturday, but who frustrates you most in the current West Ham squad?
Fredericks.
Yeah. Tim is applauding, I'm sure. I can see he's they say hi. Yeah. I don't know if this is what he's responding to, but he's out there listening. He doesn't like Fredericks very much either. And Neil tells me it's 11 questions now. Well, I can see that because I have a listed for him. All right. Number 4. This is the one that it stumps everybody. Now, Grant, we know you're a glory hunter, and that's why you support West Ham. All right. So let's get your answer on this. Which would you rather have, FA Cup or top 4 finish?
Top 4.
Really?
Wow.
That was quick.
I think. Well, I've thought about it a lot. That's been brought up a lot, but
yeah.
I just think if we could, especially this season, with the way that there's really only 2 top teams and all the rest of the positions are in play, if we could get in and establish ourselves as a regular European contender, bring in more money, more fans, I just think it'd be.
The argument is, listen, I always say FA Cup because it's a trophy. We haven't won a trophy in 40 years, and I just really want to see West Ham win a trophy. But the benefits of top 4 far outweigh the benefits of the FA Cup for the club, right? For recruiting players, for getting money. There's no doubt about that. We're going to recruit better players. We're going to bring in more money. We're going to, So, listen, as a practical choice, it actually makes more sense. The emotional choice to me is FA Cup, but the sensible choice is top four. We probably won't have either one. But, let's not give up yet. It's only October.
Don't know if we win our next game against Everton, and everybody else, if matches or results come to fruition, we could be top four. We'd be fourth place, I believe.
We could, which is why it'll never happen, because every time that every time we have a chance to do that, we do what we did on Saturday.
Every time there's last year we had 3 different matches, 3 different chances. If we won, we'd move into 7th spot.
Yeah,
lost each one of those 3,
including one against Everton, where we were pathetic. All right, so well, that's 2 weeks away. So we get to stew over our loss to Palace for 2 weeks. What about West Ham do you love?
I love the background, working class team, the culture, the whole, I don't know, just the atmosphere of West Ham fans and the friendliness. I've met a few people. I was in Austin last time I was down there, and I have a light blue one of these little pullovers too. And I was wearing that in Austin, and an English guy just came up to me and started talking. And he's like, "Oh," and asked me how much I knew about football and all of that. And he goes, he was from East London, and he was just amazed he saw somebody in Austin, Texas, wearing a West Ham, shirt. So, it's just that, the sort of the tight knit. I think maybe it's from all these years of not winning, but it's sort of a tight knit group.
Yeah.
It reminds me of being a military brat. You meet a military brat somewhere, and even though you may have never met before, you have all these shared experiences, and it's like you're their best friend and overnight. And it's the same. It's the same with the West Ham fans.
It's funny you mentioned that, Grant. When I lived in Holland and I was playing rugby, we took a trip to Barcelona, rugby trip to Barcelona. And I noticed when you travel with Dutch people, there aren't many Dutch people in the world. When they meet other Dutch people, they make immediate friends. It's like being part of a club. You know what I mean? You don't just say hi or wave or "Hey, you're from Holland too." You sit and chat and you've known each other for years. And I think you get that with West Ham too, because again, especially in this country, there aren't that many of us. If you are one of us, it means you're a pretty dedicated supporter. You watch the club, you're serious about it. You're not, a glory hunter who's just, looking at the results on Saturday afternoons. So yeah, I think everybody says the same thing. It's the fans, and that's the way I feel too. It's the fans. It's all of us we have on here on the show. All right, now the flip side. What about West Ham do you hate? Days like Saturday?
Yeah. That, and I hate being always asked, "Oh, are you a West Ham fan because you watch Green Street Hooligans?"
Oh, yes.
I was a West Ham fan 30 years before that movie was made, so more than 30 years. So
that's fair. That's very fair. Although we've had plenty of people on here who said they've come to be West Ham fans through Green Street, and I always say, if that's how you get here,
whatever works.
You get here as long as you get here. But yes, I can see that being annoying to somebody who's who would watch the FA Cup final live in 1980. That's 40 years, by the way, in case you're at home.
Right.
What sound? This is right out of the James Lipton questionnaire. What sound makes you happy? And it can be football related or not. Doesn't matter.
What sound makes me happy? I don't know. Probably the sound of the oven dinging when it hits the temperature you're waiting for to put the food in.
Yes. No, I'm the same way. I'm very impatient about that stuff. Yeah. Then you're not far at that point. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. I'm a kind of a foodie, and I had aspirations when I was younger to be a chef. I worked my way through school and college and law school and kitchens, and so I just
That's good. I like that one. It's the first time we've had that on the show. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
What is your favorite curse word, or as we say in Texas, your favorite cuss word?
Oh, I don't know that I have one. How about bollocks?
Bollocks. That's a great one. That's a great English one. And I find myself saying that a lot because it's not offensive here, right? Nobody knows what it means.
Right.
Bollocks. That and cussing in French. Those are the things that I do most often.
cussing Dutch a lot too, so nobody knows what I'm
Oh,
saying.
a little Godverdamme or a little conquer or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I most of what I learned playing rugby was cuss words.
Right.
So,
Universal language.
yeah, most of what so that was most of the Dutch that I've retained. What team? This is almost everybody gets the same answer for this, but I will leave it up to you. What team do you love to beat?
Well, it used to be a toss-up, but now 100% Arsenal.
Oh, good.
You know, it
Good.
was, Stan Kroenke owns Arsenal, and Stan
Oh, that's right.
friggin' moved the Rams to LA.
Back to LA. That's right.
So,
Yeah, everybody says Tottenham, but I love that you didn't say Tottenham, and I love that you said Arsenal because, man, American Arsenal fans are some of the very worst. Just the very worst. And yeah, Stan Kroenke, that funny-looking little guy, little porn stash guy. Yeah, he did. He took the Rams out of LA after what's her name moved him to. Took the Rams out of St. Louis.
Right.
Georgia, what's her name?
Georgia Frontiere.
Georgia Frontiere. Yeah,
She was from St. Louis. So after her husband died, she moved the team here, and then when she died, Kroenke bought the team out from her kids and moved them back to LA.
You guys almost got the Patriots back in the early '90s. When Orthwein bought the team off of, I think it was Victor Kiam, he bought it from, before Robert Kraft bought the team. The plan was to buy the Patriots and move them to St. Louis back around 92, something like that. Can you even imagine? St. Louis would have been the greatest NFL city in America. Anyway,
Right.
and it would still be a Cardinals town no matter what. All right, so name a player. So Arsenal's a good answer, although for me it's always Chelsea. Name a player, past or present, that for you epitomizes West Ham.
Well, since he was the star of the first match I ever watched, I have to say Sir Trevor Brooking.
I think
he was amazing. I mean, I watched him play some after that. Watching it on TV, and he was just always working hard. Up and down the pitch, and then he scored some pretty important goals in West Ham's history, especially the one in that FA Cup final.
And he was a good manager when he was caretaker manager. He did a good job, and he's a gentleman. He's just a gentleman. He really is. I think he's just. Of course, all the West Ham legends are really. I mean, Billy Bonds is the same way. But Trevor Brooking to me is all class on the pitch, class off the pitch. Wonderful representative for the club, and we're really fortunate to have people like him, still involved with West Ham and around West Ham. And I think he just had a birthday the other day, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't know the exact date, but yeah, it was like last week
to 70. I think he's 71 now, something like that. So still going strong. All right, now the last question. You don't get to say the 1980 FA Cup final because you saw it on TV, but anything else? Everybody always says that one. So I'm disqualifying this answer for you. But if you could take a time machine back to experience anything having to do with West Ham, where would you go? What would you experience?
I think I would like to have been at that last match at the Boleyn ground.
Oh yeah, that's what I said.
I mean, there's a lot of them I'd like to see, but I think if you're taking away being live in person at the FA Cup final, I think that would be the next one for me.
I know it's not fair because you weren't live in person, and that would obviously have been magnificent. But yeah, the last match at the Boleyn would have been really magical. And actually, we did have somebody on the show who was there. One of the guys in New York was actually there. And he said he got a little resentment from some of the old school East London, crowd who said, "Hey, my cousin wanted to come, my uncle wanted to come. They've been West Ham fans for 50 years. They couldn't make it. But here you are, some Yank strolling in." I sort of get that, but still, if I'd had a ticket, I'd have gone.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't be mad at them. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not. Well, I don't want to word this inappropriately, but at the end of the day, it's not just specifically for the people that live in the area. I know obviously, they're the ones that have gone to the most games, but the last game with the Boleyn is, important for a lot of West Ham fans, I would assume. I would have loved to have been there. I mean, I definitely can understand the sentiment of, I wanted, or, my family member wanted to be there. Well, I mean, I'm sorry that they're not, but I'm not going to give up my ticket just because they can't make it,
And I think his experience was generally great, as experiences with West Ham fans always are. I think it was one or two people kind of gave him a little bit of grief, but
Yeah,
still
it was an
worthwhile.
emotional day. I can get it.
Oh, I get it too, and people are still upset about the bullet, and of course that's another conversation altogether. But yeah, I definitely do get it. It is about time for me to go make lunches for the boys, and maybe watch a little extremely unsatisfying American football. Maybe turn on one of those Mexican game replays from last night. Watch some proper football of Mexico. But anyway, it's time for us, I think, to sign off. Grant, Springfield, Missouri, thank you so much for coming on with us. It's been fantastic talking to you. Really, really interesting. I'm really glad you talked to us because your experiences are just fascinating to me, that you did what you did in Holland and Germany, and playing football and being a West Ham fan since 1980. Our first glory hunting West Ham fan we've ever had in the show. But you got it all wrong, as you know. So.
Right. No, thanks for having me. It was great. I've been watching the show for a while, and a couple, friends of mine have been on, Brawley and Dave, and I was kind of shocked the first time I got asked if I'd be available sometime. I know when you sent me the message today, I was like, oh, hell yeah. So thank you.
We'll have you back. It's been great. And Celly, always great having you on. Always nice talking to you. And we'll talk to you again on Sunday next week.
Yeah, sounds good. It's been fun. Nice to meet you, Grant.
Tune in tomorrow night. There's I think Tim posted the schedule earlier in one of the comments. I don't know where it's gone, but I know we've got a show tomorrow night. I think it's the Fantasy Premier League show, if I'm not mistaken, is tomorrow night. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock Eastern, don't remember which. Just tune in at 8. If they're not there, tune back in at 9. That's the best way to do it. We got stuff going on all week, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. So tune in tomorrow night, and they'll tell you what's coming on after that. But until then, again, thanks, Grant. Thanks, Celly. And come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.